Swamini, you will be given 20 minutes to deliver your speech.
Namaste everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I would like to share my PowerPoint presentation. So, combating religious extremism, wisdom from the Hindu tradition. Today is a very important day in the Hindu calendar. It is called Sarva Pitra Amavasya, which means it is the day we honor all our ancestors. We remember them with gratitude and honor their sacrifices that they have made for this current generation of humanity. I must make a special mention of all our ancestors who have fought 800 years of Mughal rule in India, as well as 200 years of British rule. All our ancestors, many of them, they fought for their right to practice their own religion as a Hindu in the land of the Hindus, and so we remember their sacrifices today. I hope you join me in my prayers for their well-being and also that we may learn from their sacrifices. My talk is divided into 3 sections for today. The first is religious freedom as practiced within Hinduism and between religions. The second is Hindu genocide as a result of Hindu phobia and religious extremism. And the third is the joint action to combat religious extremism. My first point, religious freedom as practiced within Hinduism. Now, anyone who's been to India will know the kind of diversity that exists here does not exist anywhere in the world. And so even within Hinduism, there is a lot of religious freedom. Of course, we all know that Hindus form a religious minority in the world at less than 15%. It's the only pre-Bronze Age civilization with a living continuous culture. So Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma has an established tradition of religious freedom, and we have walked our talk over millennia. So the different denominations, they differ radically on the sacred texts they follow, the different customs and the deities that are worshipped. And yet, we have all managed to coexist with each other, a little bit like a salad bowl, not a melting pot. So in a salad bowl, the vegetable and the fruit and the nut, they can all coexist. They retain their distinctive flavor and they contribute to the collective. And that's how we have managed over centuries. Then even between religions, great religions like Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, they were actually founded here in the land of Hinduism. And such is the religious freedom that is enjoyed by these religions to practice their own beliefs and customs. Communities such as the Jews and the Persians, they were embraced and encouraged to flourish here because they were disenfranchised and suffered religious persecution elsewhere. So, mutual respect, not tolerance, mutual respect for other religions is so immense that there is no attempt to convert one religion to another, because Hinduism does not consider itself superior or inferior to another religion. We recognize, however, that all religions do not have the same goal, but all are valid forms of worship, and so people have the freedom to practice their own religion. Now, lest people think that I am talking about the great, glorious, ancient past, let me just quote the Pew Research report. And just before that, I want to highlight that Hinduism is a vision of interconnectedness of all beings and their underlying oneness. So that makes it a religion, a vision, and a way of life that supports it. The Pew Research report, which is as recent as a year ago, conducted just before the pandemic. Now, what is very important to note that all these communities that you see here on the left recognize, and there's a huge hopping majority, that respecting all religions is important to being Indian. And it is a very important part of their religious identity and the freedom that people experience in practicing their own religion. If we compare this kind of data with other countries, I'm not sure we're going to see something similar. This is very unique to India, and the world has a lot to learn from how religious freedom has been practiced in India. And this brings me to another concern that was articulated in the background note of CCA about anti-conversion laws and them being unconstitutional in India. And I want to correct this misperception. So the data suggests that anti-conversion laws are in practice in 9 Indian states, and they have been formulated and executed by the state government. Now, what is important to note are these are not blanket anti-conversion laws. If anybody wants to convert to another religion, they are welcome to. But this law of anti-conversion is against forced and fraudulent conversions or conversions by inducement. And all of us will agree that these are unethical, and they have already been prohibited under Article 30. India is a signatory to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And so, even when there were petitions in the Supreme Court of India challenging the validity of these laws, state laws, the Supreme Court very clearly handed it over back to the high courts and said that if the right to convert becomes a part of your right to practice your religion, then you are creating law and order issues, and that is a state subject. Also, there is a limitation on the right to convert. It is that freedom is not recognized as absolute, and that limitation is legitimate and reasonable. It's a reasonable restriction of the right to practice one's own religion. Another concern is also about the rise of religious nationalism in India, particularly Hindu nationalism, religious nationalism. Now, again, I want to quote the Pew report because it's very recent data, which shows that the different minority groups, after living side by side for generations, have continued to engage in practices and beliefs that are associated with Hindu traditions. They recognize their ancestors to be Hindus, and what is being referred to as the rise of Hindu nationalism is actually a pushback reaction against the Hindu phobia that has been practiced across centuries. By no means am I justifying any act of violence, but to address these issues, we have to recognize and call out the elephant in the room, which is Hindu phobia. Hindu phobia and Hindu genocide as a result of religious extremism. As a Hindu monk, I experience a lot of pain and anguish when I think of the acts of violence against the Hindu community. And I recognize that a lot of it is because of Hindu phobia. What do I mean? Hindu phobia is a set of antagonistic, destructive and derogatory attitudes and behaviors towards Sanatana Dharma, that is Hinduism, and even Hindus that may manifest as prejudice, fear or hatred. The range of Hindu-phobic acts extends from microaggression to attempts at genocide. The different projects of Hindu phobia have included the destruction and desecration of Hindu sacred spaces, aggressive and forced proselytization of Hindu populations, targeted violence towards Hindu people because they needed to be reformed, violence against community institutions, and so on. And we recognize Hindu phobia when there is a reduction of the entirety of Hinduism to a rigid, oppressive, and regressive tradition. All the progressive, pro-social, reflexive aspects are ignored or attributed to non-Hindu influences, and this discourse erases and denies the persecution of Hindus. A lot of the stereotypes that exist are used to justify that Hindus need to be reformed or the religion is demonized. And so when I think about this, all my intergenerational trauma wounds open up. From the Mongols to the Turks, from the Arabs to the Portuguese, from the French to the British, from the Islamic iconoclasts to Christian proselytizers, to Marxist leftists who have destroyed the culture, the Hindus have been through a lot. And this violence has been caused due to religious extremism. The sad truth is the trauma of the Hindu community has not been understood by the world. I am a Hindu monk, and I have taken a vow of non-violence, ahimsa, but I speak about the violence that the Hindus have been subjected to due to religious extremism. And I will just quote a few incidents. Most people won't know that the Hindu genocide is almost 29 times more than the Jewish genocide. Some incidents from our history. Mahmud of Ghazni killed and enslaved 2 million Hindus almost 1,000 years ago. And lest people think that, oh, he was just plundering the wealth. He himself declared on his own coins, Mahmud Butshikan, Mahmud the breaker of idols. So many mosques were built on top of destroyed Hindu temples. Then, of course, the Portuguese Inquisition in Goa, where more than 16,000 Hindus were brought to trial, tortured and murdered. Even Arthur Schopenhauer writes how Hindus were forcibly converted to Christianity because it was recognized that they needed to be reformed and they were demons, etc. Hindu idols were vandalized and churches were built on top of the temples. Then, of course, during the partition of India, both Hindus and Muslims have suffered. And when it comes to Hindus, about 7 million Hindus and Sikhs were expunged from their homes. They were murdered, their properties were looted, and a lot of brutalities were suffered. And in more recent times, just about 30 years ago, 6 lakh Kashmiri Hindus in their own country were forced to flee because of Islamic insurgents. And they were given only 3 options. You either convert to Islam, leave, or die. And only 3,000 remain today. And of course, just 2 years ago, there have been more than 62 attacks on Hindu temples across the world. The list goes on. So what happened to us Hindus was that it was not unique. It has happened to every single ancient and classical culture in the world. The Inca civilization, the Mayan civilization, the Egyptian civilization, they've all been destroyed because of religious extremism. And who will speak for these who did not survive because their culture was totally wiped out? The reason I speak about Hindu genocide and Hindu phobia is not out of any hatred for any community or any religion. Neither do I have hatred as a monk, nor do I want to promote hatred. But the truth must be told, it must be acknowledged, so that history may never repeat itself. And contrary to popular understanding, numbers do not define majority or minority. A single virus, we have seen what it has done to the whole world in the last 1.5–2 years. a boat full of Britishers ended up ruling the world. In today's world, what defines majority and minority is the asymmetry of power, and that has created havoc. We have seen what has happened in Afghanistan, and so we have to think a little more strategically. I have one best practice to share, which brings me to my last point. You know, when we talk about interreligious dialogue, there's been a lot of emphasis on discussing commonalities. But what is also important is to discuss the differences and how we may bridge the differences. These are my very dear friends from different parts of the world, from different religions. There is a Buddhist, and there's a rabbi, and there are Catholics, pastors and bishops from Africa. And the truth is that the current communities may not have much to do with what their ancestors did, but we can, with mutual respect, live in peaceful coexistence. And here is where I talk about the best practice between the Hindu religious leadership and the Jewish religious leadership. This happened in 2008, and I shared the declaration of this mutual understanding and cooperation. It was a culmination of many dialogues, and what happened as a result of that is the affirmations that the participants made. Because it happened at the highest level of religious leadership, it has a huge impact on the rest of the community. Hindus and Jews seek to maintain their respective heritage and pass it on to the succeeding generations while living in respectful relations with other communities. I'm just quoting one or 2 points because it's very important for us to understand that if it has happened between two religious communities, it can happen with others as well. 4th point, neither seeks to proselytize or undermine or replace in any way the religious identities of other faith communities. And what was very beautiful about that declaration that happened in 2008 in Haifa, Israel, is that the Jews recognize that Hinduism is not an idol-worshipping religion. A lot of the Hindu phobia and therefore persecution has happened because Hinduism was recognized as an idol-worshipping religion. But no Hindu worships idols. Hindus only worship God in any form. And Hindu relates to the Supreme Being when he or she prays to a particular manifestation. And so this declaration is a very important step in the leadership of two religious communities in the world. And I think that it paves the way for mutual coexistence, mutual respect between Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Jains, Muslims across the world. Of course, we already see this in India, but we can take it to other parts of the world. And so my question to this August gathering is, can the Hindu leadership and the Christian churches come together to declare that Hindus worship God and not idols? Because this is my request as a Hindu religious leader to the Christian religious leadership, because then you will not promote Hindu phobia, and because of that, my right to practice my religion in my country will be upheld. So if we are able to do this, and I'm not only talking about Hindu phobia, I'm also talking about Islamophobia or phobia against any religion, because mutual respect allows us to practice one's own religion. So perhaps scholars from both traditions can come together and look at the differences and see what is mutually acceptable so that we may uphold mutual respect. And finally, our festival of the goddess Navaratri is coming up. It's a 9-day festival, and therefore I seek her blessings that this conference is a good success, and also that we may see ourselves as channels of peace. So before I play that quickly, I just want to do a prayer. Sarva Mangala Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadhike Sharanye Trembake Gauri Narayani Namostute. If I sing, then all of y'all will go to sleep, so I thought we will just play this. Okay.
I think maybe you have to switch windows or share that particular screen.
Where there is hatred, let me bring your love. Where there is injury, your pardon love. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, only love. And where there's sadness, ever joy. Oh, Master, grant that I may never see so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your respect.
Thank you so much, Swamini. And it's indeed actually saddening to hear the stories you shared. But as you said, it is not only occurred to our friends from Hinduism, but also friends from different parts of the world also experience the same in their own context. But once again, thank you so much for sharing and reminding us who we are actually in this world. Thank you.